Why the Denver Nuggets will be even better this season than they were last year. Over this previous season, the Denver Nuggets were able to shock a lot of people and win the NBA championship. And while doing so, their stars really showed out. Both Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray had their best playoff performances really of their entire career. And I think going into this next season, the Nuggets have a chance to be even better than they were last year, which is a real dangerous thought to the rest of the NBA. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm JuicySports. I make opinionated NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. The Denver Nuggets have been an extremely impressive team in the Western Conference for really a decent amount of time now. They were always extremely good during the regular season, being a top 3 or a top 4 seed in the West for most of those seasons, and although when they did make it to the playoffs, they didn't win an NBA championship, they still were able to make it past the first round a decent amount of time, and they still were able to have some success. So before this previous season, I thought the Nuggets were in somewhat of a weird spot, as they were clearly good enough to make the playoffs each and every year as a high playoff seed, and they were also clearly good enough to make it past the first round and probably even make it past the second round. But once it came down to making the NBA finals, or once it came down to actually winning an NBA championship, they clearly were struggling in that department. And their issues came down to a couple different factors. Maybe it was some injuries going into the playoffs, maybe it was some struggles they had during the regular season, maybe it was due to some off the court issues, maybe it was just due to straight up poor play in the playoffs. But regardless of what their issues were, they weren't able to make it to the NBA finals and win an NBA championship. But as I mentioned before, this previous season, everything completely changed for Denver. Not only were they able to play very well during the regular season, which is something they've been used to over the past 5 or so seasons, but once it came down to the playoffs, they played extremely well in each and every series and ended up winning an NBA championship. And a huge reason for why, in my opinion, the Nuggets were finally able to make it over the hill is maybe due in part to all the experience and all the failures they had in the past, but also probably and mostly due to the fact that their star players were all healthy out there. And talking about Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, and Michael Porter Jr. The fact that all 3 of those guys were finally going to be healthy out there on the court together and playing at 100%, mind you, I did think was a huge factor, and I thought the way that specifically Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic were playing in the finals was also a huge factor for why they were able to win that year's NBA championship and finally get over that hump. But a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, why do I think the Nuggets have a real chance to be better this season than they were last year? Well, I think it comes down to a couple different factors, but the first and main factor has to be the overall experience they've gained. Because I talk about this in a lot of my videos, but whenever you add players that have championship experience, it only benefits the rest of your team. And when you talk about the Denver Nuggets, who have a very similar roster this season to what they did last year, basically their entire team has championship experience now. And the positives to that is they've already won a championship, so they know what it takes in order to win another one. And I do think just having a bunch of guys that understand really what it takes is only going to benefit this Nuggets team going forward, and they're probably even going to have some better habits during the regular season this year and during the playoffs this year than maybe they even had last season. So I definitely do think the experience that a lot of these players gained in winning an NBA championship is going to be a huge factor for why I think they're going to be even better this next season. Now, the next factor for why I think the Nuggets have a chance to be even better this next season than they were last year is actually due to the fact that they were able to keep their roster together. Now, typically when you talk about a team being better this season than they were this previous, you typically look at some of the new additions that they made to the roster, but when you look at this Nuggets team, I actually think it's the opposite. I think just based upon how well they were able to play last year, how good their chemistry was, the fact that they were able to win an NBA championship obviously is a huge reason for why I think it was a good idea to keep everybody together and not make significant changes. Because now going into this next season, these guys will have another year of experience under their belt playing together where they can create even more chemistry than they had last year. A lot of their guys on the roster are still relatively young and have room to improve. Like for example, Jamal Murray is still pretty young in the league, and I actually do expect him to improve, although he was extremely good last season. Even Michael Porter Jr. is another young guy that's only going to improve with time. Christian Braun was a guy who played somewhat well last season, but I think he's going to improve this year compared to last year. I do like some of the rookies that they did bring in. I think think they have a chance to provide for this team. And even Nikola Jokic has a chance to improve. Even though I don't even know how it's possible, he played so well last year and even the year prior, I do think there is a chance he gets a little bit better in certain aspects of his game. But overall, keeping this roster together and keeping that camaraderie together is, in my opinion, going to be a huge factor for why I think they have a chance to be even better this next season than they were last year. But the next question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, do I expect the Nuggets to win the NBA championship this upcoming season? Based upon the fact that they were able to win last year, and I said they're going to be even better this season than they were last year. Well, in my opinion, I think based upon their own personal expectations, it has to be championship or bust. If they don't win a championship this season should be seen as a failure. But with that being said, I don't think it's going to be easy. When you look at teams both in the Eastern and in the Western Conference, I think teams have gotten significantly better from where they were last year. Just talking about some teams in the West, you talk about the Phoenix Suns, who were pretty good last year but also made a significant upgrade in Bradley Beal. You also talk about teams like the Dallas Mavericks, LA Clippers, Sacramento Kings, Memphis Grizzlies, Golden State Warriors, LA Lakers. All those teams are always going to be in the mix, in my opinion, to win an NBA championship, although I do think a lot of those teams don't really have a great shot to do so. They'll at least be in the mix. But looking in the Eastern Conference, this is where I think a couple teams made significant upgrades that could potentially give problems to the Denver Nuggets if they made it to the finals. And those two teams I'm talking about are the Boston Celtics, who recently acquired both Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. I think both of those additions are actually huge. They provide offense as well as defense, which is something that I think is going to come into play, especially once it comes down to playoff time. But also the biggest pickup of all during this offseason has to be Damian Lillard to the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, I don't even know how that's allowed to add a player of the caliber of Dame to a team that's as good as the Milwaukee Bucks are, because now you talk about a team that has Damian Lillard that has a capability of putting up 30 plus points on any given night, Giannis Antetokounmpo, who has the same kind of ability, and Chris Middleton, who has a similar kind of ability as well. And that's not to mention all the depth and all the other players they have on this roster as well. So to be honest, I think when you look at it, I think this comes down to a 4-team race. I think out of the Western Conference, it's either going to be the Phoenix Suns or the Denver Nuggets, and I think from the Eastern Conference, it's either going to be the Boston Celtics or the Milwaukee Bucks. I think other teams definitely have a chance to win a championship or definitely have a chance to make it to the NBA Finals, but at this point, making a very early prediction, those are the 4 teams I think it's going to come down to. And out of those teams, I definitely do think the Nuggets do have a chance to beat them. Of course, they do have the advantage of camaraderie and chemistry. They do have the advantage of just winning an NBA championship last year, but at the same time, I do think it's going to be a little bit more difficult this time around for them to win a championship than it was last year. And even if it is more difficult for them to win a championship this season than it was last year, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not as good of a team as they were last season. It just means the competition has gotten a little bit better, and that's something I fully expect to happen. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening for the Denver Nuggets during this upcoming season. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the Nuggets have a chance to be even better this season than they were last, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy it, check one of these 2 videos popping up now. And until the next time, peace out, guys.